It's time to ride the funk train. Now listen here, folks. This is Funkmaster V of the TV show Wrestling with Ghosts. I'm a pro wrestler. I'm a booty shaker. I'm a lip smacker. And let me tell you, I love independent television. Now, Kat here at Paranormal Heart has let me talk to you for a second about Asy Television. ASY Television. Look it up. Soon it will be on Roku, Fire Stick, Apple TV, and online for a cheap, low price. You can watch hundreds and hundreds of shows, including scary shows like my own, Wrestling with Ghosts, or food shows like Go There, Eat That, Best Day Ever, the UFO show with Amy Dumas, the list goes on and on. It's AsyTV.com. Check it out now. ASY TV.
Welcome to Paranormal Heart, a place where people can talk about their paranormal experiences. With your host, Kat Ward, along with a special segment, Oddities with John Mallard.
Welcome back, folks, to Paranormal Heart. You already know where to find us, but for you new listeners, you can find us on the second and last Sunday of each month on Podbean and YouTube. You can also find us on sparkradionet.org, iTunes, Stitcher, Podchaser, and anywhere you find fine podcasts. Well, guys, I tell you, Mother Nature is certainly not herself right here in the Ottawa Valley. The weather has been crazy here this past week. Just last week, we had 3 days of being in an extreme heat advisory, and when you factor in the humidity, it was brutal. The highest it got was 35 Celsius, which is, I think, about 95 degrees Fahrenheit, but when you factor in the humidity, it reached 42 degrees Celsius, or, 104 Fahrenheit, if my math is correct. There were a few thunderstorms in Ontario due to this heat. We had a couple of thunderclaps here in Ottawa Valley, but nothing serious. So that happened, and on Saturday, it was at the other end of the spectrum. We had a frost advisory. Yep, stupid heat, then frost. The heat we had was unusual for this time of year, but yes, here in Canada, it can get that hot in the summertime. This episode's shout-out goes to my listeners in my home country, Canada. The majority of you wonderful listeners are all over the world, but I have to thank my fellow Canadians, too. Thank you. Merci beaucoup, and please like, share, subscribe, and follow. Well, folks, have some sad news. I have to announce that the oddities, this episode will be the last one. There may be the odd one here and there as a special segment, but after this one, oddities will be laid to rest. I'd like to thank John Mallard, Steve Stockton, and Dixie Cryptid for contributing to the show and giving us great stories. I appreciate you all so very much. And now, for the last time, here is Oddities with John Oddball Mallard. Over to you, John.
Hey, oddballs. Welcome to Oddities, strange facts about an odd world that are quite true. My name is John, and I'm sure by now you guys have probably heard about, well, these murder hornet things. And you know what? It's about time someone picked up for my little tiny friends who are actually related to common wasps and are very, very important to ecosystems in Asia. Hence the actual name of the murder hornet, which is Asian giant hornet. As you can probably tell from my demeanor, I'm kind of mad. And I'm going to tell you why. I don't like it when people make fun of my friends. I also don't like it when people, kind of spread around bullshit. And, that's what this whole murder hornet thing is. It's bullshit. So I'm here to blow the lid off it for you guys. And, to be honest, I'm going to give you guys some amazing facts about the world's largest hornet, which is kind of creepy when you look at it. It's definitely nightmare fuel for a lot of people, but the problem is, this whole thing's a hoax, man. This whole thing's a hoax. They don't pose a threat to us. Asian hornets do not pose a threat to us. They pose a threat to ecosystems, and they certainly pose a threat to our honeybee colonies, that's for sure. But these things, they can't hurt us at all. They have a pretty painful sting, but reality is they're not going to touch you unless you screw with their nest. You know what I mean? Anyway, here's what you need to know. Their name isn't a lie. The Asian giant hornets are positively huge. These insects measure almost 2 inches long and have a stinger that's almost a quarter of an inch long. That, along with a highly toxic venom, gives them some serious stinging power. In fact, when people get stung by multiple giant hornets, there's a good chance they'll die. But you see, this is where the bullshit begins, because guess what? You literally got to go all Thomas J on my girl and step on their shit. Okay, so there you go. I said it. One Japanese entomologist who's been stung by one of these hornets said it's like having a hot nail being driven into my leg. Because, Asian people do that all the time, apparently. Look, the way the Asian giant hornets actually consume honeybees is a little crazy, though. And that's kind of like where they get their big, scary mystique from. These guys actually raid the hive and they slaughter every worker, the queen, everything they get their hands on. And then, dirty, 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 dirty hornets. They actually make a lunch out of larvae. Yeah, they chew up the baby bees, making a gooey paste that they then take to their hive and feed their own larvae. The adult hornet, however, doesn't absorb any of the paste. It just gives every gooey bit to the larva. From there, the hornet baby digests the paste to power its own growth. So what does the giant hornet actually eat? Let's just say that for Asian giant hornets, getting lunch is as easy as taking candy from babies. After the adult feeds the colony larva, it's quickly payback time. As a hornet larva digests the mashed potato version of the honeybees, it starts to secrete a high-energy saliva. And that saliva is just what the adult hornet was waiting for. The adult actually laps up baby drool. These things feed. So just put this in your mind. They regurgitate for the babies. The babies eat what's been regurgitated. The babies then drool, and then they eat the drool. I'm sorry, but how the hell did that evolve? Actually evolved from ants, like every other wasp. But anyway, that's beside the point. The adult laps up the baby drool, which contains all the nutrients a full-grown Asian hornet actually needs to survive. Like we said, it's like taking candy from a baby. So there you go. These poor hornets, they've been dragged through the mud. They've been spotted in the U.S. People are freaking out, calling them murder hornets. They're not murder hornets. They're more like slaughter hornets towards bees. Are they dangerous to humans? Any kind of insect is dangerous to humans if you get stung multiple times and you do something really stupid, like, run naked towards one of their hives and decide to try to have sex with it or something. Yeah, maybe then you might die, but reality of it is, let's take the murder hornet out of their name. They're not murder hornets. They're giant Asian hornets, goddammit. And they're definitely odd. For more odd, weird stuff like this, make sure you guys check out the Odd to Newfoundland Paranormal Podcast. And that's all the buzz about the, not so murdering hornet. You know what? I'm going to go ahead and say it. On a calm, gentle giant Asian hornets. Have a great day.
Thanks so much, John. My next guest has researched cryptozoology for the past 25 years. Author of Beasts of Britain, he's also working on a TV series under the same name. He's a speaker and presenter, and has a great documentary called Sticks and Stones, UK Bigfoot. You can find that on YouTube. He's also working on other fascinating books on mysterious creatures we call cryptids. I'd like to welcome Andy McGrath. Hello, Andy. Welcome to Paranormal Heart.
Hi, Kat. How are you doing? Happy to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here. Took some time. My apologies. I got the time zone a little confused today, but we're here.
I think it's that hour jumps back, hour jumps forward difference happens at different points in the
that's
year in
right.
different parts of the world.
It
So there's a
does.
point when we're 6 hours difference, and there's a point when we're 5 hours different, and there's a point where we've switched over and you guys haven't yet. I think there's a little gap. I forget the date, but there's a little gap where it's 6 and 5, but we're not quite sure where the crossover is. But it's happened now, definitely. We're
Yes,
back
I never
on
even
5
thought
hours.
of that. Yes. Oh
Yeah,
well, but
yeah.
we're here.
Yes, I'm very happy to be too.
So I had heard you on Brian Bowden's show with Ron Murphy. I think Ron was on there as well because he's not
Yes.
always on. He's not always on Nobubumi. Absolutely love that interview, and I just had to contact you and have a chat with you as well.
Well, I'm very happy that you did. Love Ron and Brian, of course. Brothers from other mothers and all that,
Yes.
kind of stuff. They are two guys after my own heart. They're all hard and completely genuine, and that's something that's lacking sometimes in these realms in which we inhabit. So it's nice to always have it direct and on the chin, and with the kind of care and tact that they put into it too. It's very, very lovely.
Agreed. I refer to Brian as Uncle Brian. We're not even related. And Ron, oh yeah, he's amazing too. I just interviewed him not too long ago, the crypto guru himself. But no, I also watched your documentary, Sticks and Stones UK Bigfoot. Brilliant. And I absolutely love your approach to your investigations. What really drew me to your style when I heard you on Nobubumi was when you mentioned that you put apples out and people say, oh, the next day the apples are gone. Bigfoot took them. Well, no, there are other creatures in the forest who actually eat apples, so it's not necessarily Bigfoot. And I thought, oh, what a wonderful approach. I love that's my way of thinking as well, because I'm also a paranormal investigator, so I don't always react just because I get whatever evidence I have. I also want to look behind the evidence, so I really, really like that. So please do tell us more about your research.
Well, that particular, when I first started getting into British Bigfoot, at least, and it's a phenomenon I was very unaware of. I'd heard one or two reports in the past, but I just saw them as kind of pop culture, urban legends and things like that. Mm-hmm. And I met a lady called Deborah Hatswell, a guy called Neil Young, you might recognize from the British Finding Bigfoot British episode. Mm-hmm. Who had the sighting up in the Harwood Forest. Very nice guy. And Deborah Hatswell, very nice lady. And a few others in the community as well. And she'd created this map. She was a Bigfoot witness in the 1980s in the Salford, a place near Manchester of all places, near the River Irwell, in a country park. She'd had this teenage sighting of this Bigfoot-like creature before she even knew what a Bigfoot was. And, it affected her whole life. She'd gone searching, and eventually she joined the British Bigfoot Research Group, which was founded by Adam Bird. And she had started to create this map over time. Finally, it moved to Google, and it pinpointed each site around the country and published the witnesses' testimony in their own words. Sometimes firsthand, sometimes secondhand reports, wherever she could find them. Sterling job, a wonderful lady. And I started looking to and talking to some witnesses, and I was like, wow, this is amazing. But all of the groups, I noticed some of the American groups as well, for the people going out and looking for Bigfoot, I started to notice that all of the pages were full of pictures of sticks, basically, mm-hmm. Sticks in X-shaped, sticks in funny configurations on the ground, pinned arches, spent arch that seems to be pinned with another tree, or curled branches, things that seem to be woven or wrapped around things. And I thought, why are there so many pictures of sticks? And I realized it was because people were attributing these stick signs to Bigfoot. Now, I did go searching for these things in the early days and logging them, and I actually had a night investigation with a guy called John Spencer in a relatively small patch of forest in Surrey, where we found not only many X's and log jumbles, I call them all, stick kaplunks, where they're all jammed in at different angles. Mm-hmm. We also found tiny pinned arches that were, supported with actual sticks from other branches. They were lifted up and supported. I thought, this is very curious. There's definitely somebody doing this. But in that same forest, we found bushcraft shelters. We also found bushcraft wood stored in different trees, very carefully and preparedly. And I just went to forest after forest after forest, and what I noticed is that in all of the forests where there are the close human presence, or there could be human interaction with the forest, in the sense of bushcrafters or loggers or forestry workers just cleaning things away, especially in the forest here, there were lots of stick signs. And in all of the forests, as in the ones we went to in Galloway Forest, which is a 400 square mile national park in Scotland, which is basically unpeopled, all of the forests there are sodden, and the moss is about 1.5 feet thick, and there's ticks everywhere, and it's all this kind of pine as well as the new forest, but it's a very unpleasant place to be. Nobody bushcrafts there, nobody camps out there because it's such an unpleasant camping area. There are no travellers, Irish gypsy folk that use that area either. There were no stick signs anywhere, but there were deer and there are other things that Bigfoot could eat, and lots of forest cover. Yet, and there have been sightings in the area too of Bigfoot-like creatures, and yet there were no stick signs at all. And I thought, surely, at least as far as the investigation goes, this is proof positive that these are normally made by people. Now, that's not to say they can't be made by Bigfoot. And I know there are some very large examples of these very same things in the US in certain places. People are attributing to Bigfoot, but the one thing that stands out is they weren't there where there was no human interaction. And also, in the places where there was human interaction, we were not finding footprints in the ground around these stick teepees and structures. We were not finding hair or scat or anything else that would indicate the presence of a creature that could be up to 400 pounds plus in weight. There was nothing like that. And surely if this big, heavy, even as small as the British Bigfoot is purported to be comparatively, 5 to 8 feet tall maximum, they would still leave some trace of itself. And nobody was looking. Nobody said, oh, look, here's a Bigfoot sign, this X or this teepee. Why don't we look on the floor to see where it stood? It was such a sort of an elephant in the room. Why aren't you looking at this? Why isn't anybody checking?
Yes.
I kept proposing in the groups, why don't you check on the ground, take a lightweight casting kit with you, with the self-insulated, minimally expanding insulating foam and a piece of cardboard and a paperweight or a rock. You can cast a print in 5 minutes. Take stuff out with you. Take little baggies and tweezers and gloves for hairs. Nobody's doing it. And it's because the sticks are a feeder pill. Everybody can go out into the wood and find sticks in strange configurations, and you get a feeder pill. I found evidence of Bigfoot. Bigfoot is in my area. Look, the forest people are back again. The sticks are different today. And I made a joke about it at the time, saying, unfortunately, we can't see the trees for the woods. That saying is it's really poignant here, to say we can't see the trees for the woods. We just don't really know what we're doing here. We don't know how wrapped up in this practice we've become, to the point where it's kind of religious. It's given us a religious experience of a kind. So yeah, and happily it stands. If you find sticks in the woods, it's only evidence of trees. And that was my final take on it, and I got a lot of flack for it, because again, you're really questioning people's belief. We know when it's belief because they become angry. Because who wouldn't be angry by you questioning some reality that they come to believe in? It's not comfortable, and it's not very pleasant.
No, I think people want to they want to believe so badly that they're finding evidence, and I say evidence in quotation marks, everywhere that they look, and they're not questioning the evidence.
Yeah, that's right. And by the way, Kat, it could be evidence. It's just not evidence in and of itself. that it could be, a complementary form of evidence and a corroborative evidence of some kind. I found this A glyph on the floor, and there was a stick lean and trees that seemed to be pushed into a sort of X, and below that was this huge footprint, not made by a person, wide, sort of large, long foot, deep into the ground. I cast it. Here we go. You can see the dermal ridges. You can see all these very unusual elements of non-human bipedal foot morphology that should be present there. But no, nobody's even looking. Nobody even cares. I even put out a challenge about a year ago to say, this is the kind of equipment that you need. Let's all get out into the woods like we are anyway and try to find some tracks around these stick signs. And nothing. Nobody even disputed it, but nobody came back to me. And I thought, they're not doing it because they know they're not going to be able to find anything. Now, there's over 500 anecdotal reports, witness reports here in the UK. I'm not doubting the witnesses. That's not my job. I'm just saying this form of evidence in relation to corroborating those particular sightings is just not valid at present with what we know so far.
Yes, I before anyone starts getting too excited, I'm not questioning people's encounters or what they believe they've seen. I'm just asking for people to, again, once you've come across evidence, look for other evidence as well. As you said, look for footprints or scat or something. Or have you ever considered? You said there was lots of ticks. Have you ever collected ticks as well to see what they've been feeding on, and perhaps looking at the DNA in that respect?
I haven't. One, because I don't really like to put myself in that close proximity to ticks. Even when we were there in Scotland, I was practically drinking that tick spray, to be honest with you. Oh. Because I know it smells dreadful, but I don't want to have tick-borne encephalitis or Lyme disease.
I don't blame you.
Very, very unpleasant, and you keep that crap alive. So no, I haven't, but I also don't have access to testing facilities to test those things, and I know where I could get it. It's incredibly expensive and lengthy process to go through.
Sorry, I hear someone in the kitchen scraping pots.
Oh,
so
yes.
if you hear that in the background.
I know, I can't hear that.
Okay, I hear it through my headset. The headset picks everything up.
You've put him to work.
Yes, I think maybe perhaps someone's preparing supper, which I'm not complaining because I don't have to do it.
That's okay. I can't hear it, by the way.
Okay, good. Let's hope the audio doesn't as well.
No, not at all.
Were you like for the documentary? You said there was lots of moss. Even if there were Bigfoot there, would you actually be able to find footprints? Because the moss, it would probably be very difficult for any footprints to be able to stay because the moss would just it's so spongy.
In the pine forests, it was very, very wet, and that's where it was very mossy because they generally tend to have sort of troughs in between the roots. And yes, I don't think so. Although there were many places where if something heavy had stepped in, where it was quite wet and muddy too, it would have stayed for some time, which we noticed with our own footprints. We didn't manage to capture it on camera, but there were many areas where it could be captured in there, as you have these kind of peaks and troughs in the plantation pine, which I think would have been very, very valid. There are obviously very varied woods and forests in this area too that we visited, and there it's muddier, but still full of ticks. It's an unpleasant place to be, and I think this is because of the large deer population in Scotland, and it's just a very wild place where, for the most part, you still have the animals rule the roost, and that's the way it should be. Now, one of the funny things we had there, actually, even as we hiked over the mountain in the middle of the night to do this night investigation, as we come out into this big open area, we could see, as the sun came up over the hills, and there's a point at the beginning of the documentary where it opens with the end of this night hike. I'm standing there and the sun comes up over the hills beyond. I was actually covered in midges, these tiny, tiny biting flies that you get in Scotland. by the thousands, and trying to keep still, look focused. But I was just desperate to wipe my face off. It's even like that. So even in the daytime, you're walking through swarms of midges, and then there's ticks, and wet. Your feet are wet from all of the spongy moss. It's just not pleasant. It is there are animals there, of course. There may be Bigfoot there. There's been several sightings in this area, which I can't corroborate, but they're anecdotal sightings that seem interesting. But it's not a great place for stick signs. And I really thought, well, perhaps this is because they don't make them. Maybe we make them, and that's what we're describing here in the UK, at least. Anyway.
I wonder if Bigfoot is as intelligent as many believe. Perhaps Bigfoot doesn't even want to live in that environment because of the ticks.
Well,
who knows?
Yeah, who knows? There's the possibility. But of course, as far as our anecdotal reports go, there are sightings in the Scottish Highlands, quite a few significant ones. There's a very good witness that was in Christopher Turner's elusive documentary called Charmaine Fraser, who witnessed one in Scotland. I believe it may have been in Ayrshire also. I'll have to check on that for you. As a child, she witnessed one in the forest, and I think she was off to get something for her grandparents, and as she was returning, she saw the back of this big, tall, hairy hominid standing, with his back turned to her in the forest, terrified, and stayed with her for the rest of her life. There was also, very recently, I received a report in Ayrshire, also, in a place called near Balminick Farm, which is it's in the hamlet of Stratton in Ayrshire, or Stratton, of some poachers being in a forest overnight and running for help to a local farm, saying that they'd witnessed a very, very tall man-like creature on two legs, bipedal, very big and looming in the forest at night in the dark. They thought around 9 feet tall, but she had wondered if perhaps it was shorter. That was a state of shock that they were in. But clearly, it's something big and dark and bipedal and scary in size had run them out of the forest. She even, this local lady who lived in this farm, this very isolated farm, the two men had run to in their panic, banging on her door. She even said that they came running out of the woods like two wee frightened schoolgirls. They were in a very agitated and nervous state. And that's really, in a sense, without being sexist, that's a lady opening the door at night to two strange men, saying that they were very frightened. Clearly they must have been very, very scared. So, you have to remember Scotland. It's a trifling 1.9% of its landmass is devoted to urban sprawl. The rest is just open land, and that's it's a big area. It's a big area with not many people in. So yeah, some great sightings up there. There's also a fantastic sighting. You may have heard me speak of this one before. In Abernethy Forest. This area is closer to Loch Ness, not so far from Loch Ness. And this was made by a primate keeper in 2012. I mention it all the time because it's just such a good qualification of a sighting, that somebody had worked with primates in some very big zoos in the UK for 37 years would have seen this creature and described it so well. His name is slightly disguised. His name is Hal Smith, and he'd worked, as I say, in zoos for about 37 years. And he was retired eventually because he was almost beaten to death by a chimp, and he was badly injured. Oh. He was retired, and him and his brother afterwards, they used to always enjoy wild camping in Scotland. After my description, why would they? But yes, they still went there wild camping, and I guess they don't call it wild for no reason. And they were up there in 2012 in August, and they went out hunting with just small air rifles because we don't really have guns so much here. rabbit hunting in something they were calling the rabbit field, because there were so many rabbits. And the next morning we were going to catch their own breakfast. And they headed towards this huge blackberry bush they noticed the night before. And being very quiet, his brother was behind him because he got a bit of a heavy footfall. And after a few steps, he can't hear his brother walking behind him anymore. And he looks back to see this wide open sort of glare, this wide open jaw and this glare in his eyes. He's looking towards the blackberry bush, and he sees a dark figure crouching down with his back to them about 50 feet away. It was about 5'2", crouched down. It looked like it was eating berries from the bush, from the way its shoulders were moving and the way it was hunched over. Then it raises its head a little, turning to the side as if it hears them, stands up and turns to look straight at them. And he said it was about 7 to 8 feet tall, covered in jet black hair, except for the upper chest and face. Its skin was very dark, except for the bottom lip, which was pink. Had a wide nose and large eyes. And then he says, and this is a qualification from a primate keeper, its features reminded me of an older bonobo chimpanzee, but the face was much flatter, especially around the mouth. So hardly any muzzle, what he's talking about. It was going bald on top to my eyes. And he also sent me a picture of a balding bonobo chimpanzee to sort of show me what he meant. And it's a startling qualification of a sighting, to my mind. He was scared. He said he was scared for his life. He even dropped the gun and sort of just stared at it. And it didn't make any threatening movements towards them. It just turned around, walked to the tree line, and looking back one more time to see if they were following it, and then it was gone. And he looked back to see what his brother's reaction was, only to find he wasn't there. He'd run off. And when he got back to the campsite, he was already packing up and getting everything in the car. Because of course you would, if you think like there's an 8-foot tall ape that it's not supposed to exist in the forest you're camping in. What normal human being would stay there? Maybe I would stay, but I don't know. I'm not even sure if I would stay. But yeah, so it's amazing to him that he became sort of a secretive, I suppose, Bigfoot researcher after that, and even met some other witnesses. But to me, it's always been one of the best qualifications. He saw it. I asked him, did he think it was a hominid? Did he think it was simian or hominid? And he said to his eyes, what he saw was a simian and not a hominid. It was not human in any form. To me, it was just a big ape, like a very upright gorilla. And the arms and thighs were huge, just like a gorilla, but the face was much flatter, but still very ape-like. And that was his take on the whole situation. He saw an ape. Now, that could be his prejudice, by the way, because he's so used to dealing with apes, he could translate what he saw to ape. I think they're apes, so it was a good qualification for me. But that was his take. I saw a huge bipedal ape I'd never experienced before or known to exist in my 37 years as a primate keeper. Interesting.
That's very interesting.
Scotland.
I didn't even know before I heard your interview on Nobubumi that I had heard a little bit about Bigfoot over in the UK, but I hadn't heard a whole lot, so that really intrigued me. Do you get many encounters there? I think you had said there was 500. Was that just in Scotland?
No. Deborah Hetzel's map has over 500 now. I think they seem to cover around about 40, 50-year period with some very historical ones. There's controversy about the newness, the relative newness of the sightings, but you could also put a lot of that down to being such a small community, and one of the main collectors having her own sighting only around about 3.5 decades ago, almost 4 decades ago. So I don't know. There is, historically, we do have something called the woodwows and the green man. And the woodwows, they were hairy forest-like creatures that were meant to inhabit or rule the forest in some way. They do appear on lots of the tapestries and the noble heraldry of our European noble families, our noble families and European noble families throughout the the medieval period and the Middle Ages. And there are also all over our cathedrals and churches. There's carvings of them in wood and stone and bas reliefs in place of gargoyles and things like that. So that's very interesting. Some of them are very, very man-like but covered in hair in a stylistic sort of way. Others are very conical, head-shaped, man-like figures covered in hair and look very ape-like. And this, of course, would be going back to a time when we weren't really aware of apes in this part of the world. So there could be some qualification there, but there are many other ancient pagan things wrapped into it, often pictured carrying a club, for instance, but that's also an ancient pagan depiction of Heracles or Janus, which the Romans would have brought here. So there could be some explanation for that particular representation or the derivation of it into the woodrose. I'm just trying to be honest about it. But at least there is something there that says hundreds of years ago we were, whether it's first or second hand, depicting and drawing and carving hairy, tall bipedal men in this country.
It's fascinating how this creature seems to be all over the globe. Australia even has what they refer to as the yowie. It's just fascinating.
Yeah.
I mean, there has to be something, because everyone seems to have the same creature.
We have to think: is it like dragon lore? So the points behind dragon lore are either the symmetry between different dragon legends or different dragon depictions all around the world is because people saw a very similar animal, or the human race as a whole has very similar monsters in mind, since we're all related, so to speak. In the way they depict things, monstrous things tend to have a certain similar elaboration. I think it's more to do with, especially coming from a place like Wales where I grew up, where we have a dragon on our flag. However anatomically incorrect it may be to a pterosaur, it at least has the diamond-shaped tail, which most pterosaurs, weren't known to have in fossils until a short time ago, and that flag is quite old. So that depiction is quite old. So there's something in that, perhaps. It could be an accident. The wyvern, the griffin, all of these different representations of dragons, throughout Britain and Europe, seem to be, in many respects, very close to large dinosaur lizards or pterosaurs. And then again, the woodwose, even the satyrs of Greece seem to have some Bigfoot-like translations to their appearance. And of course, how would our superstitious forebears have translated something that they didn't know to be a part of nature, and that was elusive and it could hide itself at will, other than something that was a paranormal entity or a spiritual entity of some kind, like the satyrs, instead of some creature that lived out in nature somewhere that was just very wary of people and always has been.
Have you had any encounters with Bigfoot yourself? How did you get into this research?
I haven't had any encounters. I've had a fake one, which I use as an example of how your mind can play tricks on you. When I was up in the hills around Loch Ness. I'll tell you about that in a bit. I got into it as a young teenager, I think. I was a singer, actually. From age 12 onwards, I was a singer in a rock band and different types of music. I think I'm on year 32 this year. Yes,
I actually
32.
knew about your singing, and I was going to ask you about that after.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I always wanted to be a singer, but I was my other obsession was wildlife and cryptozoology as well, or hidden animals. That was my main interest in it, not really anything paranormal. And I just got into the same old stuff, the Arthur C. Clarke stuff, the In Search of programs, all of these great 70s and 80s series that were about mysterious things. I loved it. I would just keep clippings if a sighting came up, especially with things like Nessie, which is quite regular. I would keep a clipping in the paper and later, save a news article or an email or some news site that mentioned something that seemed significant. That's it. And I did it for years and years and years. And then finally, in 2016, after 7 years of working non-stop full-time in central London, we had our second child, and my wife said, look, you don't really have any hobbies anymore, you're not really singing so much, and you're okay at writing, why don't you write something? What about this monsters thing that you're into? You could write a blog, or you could do something. And originally I said, well, I'll write a TV series and I'll try and sell it to some friends of mine in TV. And I wrote it, and they were like, well, I don't know. And plus, somebody's just going to steal this off you, Andy. You should write a book first so it's yours. That's harder to take. So I said, okay, that's fine. They said, what are you going to call it? I said, I'll call it Beasts of Britain, and it'll be the first of many ones, and I'll do different regions and countries around the world. And I just started writing it like an idiot who'd never written a book before. I've written songs, but that's completely different. And which probably explains the horrible addiction to rhyming and alliteration that's present throughout the entire text of the book. And I'm not going to stop. I just can't. If there's some sort of possibility of alliteration in that, I just have to take it. I just can't. I can't resist it. Anyway, so I started writing it. I wrote the first one, and there was a cryptozoological organization here, a very old one called the CFZ, Center for Fortean Zoology. So more of a Fortean group, really, but for animals. And John Dimes was the leader of that, and he said, yeah, we'll publish your book. Just write it and then send me the script. They published lots of people like Nick Redfern and Carl Schuker and whoever else, Richard Freeman. And I sent it to him when it was finished, and he said, well, look, we're really busy. We can't, there's no way we can do this before 6 months from now. And I said, well, that's no good. I've told people it's coming out. I've been releasing blogs from the book while I've been writing all the way along and doing interviews. So I was interviewing and writing and saying I was doing a book even before it was finished, actually. And I said, I've told people it's coming out. And then somebody said, just go and do it on Amazon, somebody told me. And turns out the percentage was higher. They were still in the same position of having no promotion done, but they didn't have, a good name like the CFC. I didn't have the stamp on it. I had to do it myself. That's fair enough. So I did that, and then 2 years later, I looked at it and thought that's kind of ropey, and a lot of things in there don't make sense. Rewrite it. So I rewrote it and brought out the updated version, which was actually really different last year. And now I'm writing Beasts of North America. I'm about halfway through, keeping it top secret. But yes, I haven't told anybody anything that's in the book at all. So as opposed to the first one where people almost knew most of the contents before it came out, this one, I haven't told anybody any part of it whatsoever.
Please let me know when it's completed and released.
I'm hoping for end of June. It's been a bit delayed, but yeah, I'm hoping for end of June.
Nice.
Yeah.
I can't wait to find out more information about that.
Yes, it's going to be good. All of North America. It's not just the US. It's not just Canada or Mexico. It's the Caribbean. It's Greenland.
Oh, wow.
Everything. It's
nice.
The entire geographical North America.
That's interesting.
Yeah. So to any listeners out there, if you have any stories, especially ones in lesser known areas, I'm pretty good on the US, although I still accept sightings there. But anything, if you have something up in Nunavut, right? Great.
That would be interesting, yeah.
Or Baffin Island, or any fringe of Greenland, or anywhere that's really random. I'd love to hear about it.
That would be very, very interesting, yeah. I'm really looking forward to that.
Hopefully it's going to be good and not just a lot of dad waffle and alliteration.
Do you have a favorite cryptid?
I'm a lake monster guy. I just love that whole living dino. I know they're not dinosaurs, but I love that whole living dino aspect of things. It was my first love in cryptozoology, really. And I'm very friendly with Scott Modis of Zombie Plesiosaur Society, and Roland Watson, the author, the great Nessie researcher and author of Loch Ness Mystery Blog and A Water Horses of Loch Ness and many others. I just, that was always I've been to Loch Ness a bunch of times and other lakes in Britain, like Lake Windermere, that also has a similar monster called Bo Nessie. Tylyn Tegid in North Wales, or Lake Bala, as it's called in English, has another lake monster they call Teggy. All Nessie-like monsters. Fantastic Nessie-like monsters. That's what I love. There's a book, actually, called Sea Serpents and Lake Monsters of the British Isles by Paul Harrison, who's actually more of a crime writer. I think he's been discredited for making up a few crime stats recently, but the book is really good. It's really balanced and it goes up to 2001. But it covers England, Ireland, Scotland and Wales, and gives you the historical reports of lake and sea monsters in those areas in a very matter-of-fact way, without interfering, as I would, with his personal opinions on things. And it's just great. I just love that. I would love to do a whole coastal tour of the UK and every lake in between, remembering there's 31,466 lochs and lochans in Scotland. That's a lot of land to cover.
There is. Do you think you will explore some of them?
Some of them. I'll go to Loch Morar later this year. I'm going to do another little documentary with Chris on Loch Ness, and we want to look at the inlets in and out either side of the loch, the ways out to the sea, and also Loch Morar, because it's a lot closer to the sea. And it's the water is very clear there, and it's very underpopulated and desolate. Not many people visit there. And a lot of the loch is actually not accessible by land. So there's really good patches there where you can just get in and have a good look about. There was actually a great sighting there too. I'll have to tell you about that. Oh, let me find it. Now, it's one of my favorite ones because if it's descriptive. There's two, in fact. There's one where the River Morar meets the loch. There's a shingle bank. A shingle is like small sort of rocks, hard rocks. There's a shingle bank there between the river and the loch. And the loch is over 1,000 feet deep in places. It's very deep. Wow. The river is relatively deep, but the shingle bank is only a couple of feet deep. So there was a sighting there. Let me just find it for you because it's one of my favorites. Sorry, I'm just scrolling through. Now my memory is dreadful, so I have to get it up for you. Otherwise, I'll mess it up. Okay.
While you look that up, I'll mention you probably are already aware, but we also have a popular lake monster here in Canada and British Columbia called Ogopogo.
I know. I'm a big Arling Gal fan, actually.
I've been fishing on that lake with my grandparents many years ago, and they had said that they had some friends, a doctor and his wife, that were fishing, and they actually saw Ogopogo, and I was fascinated. And my grandmother said, if she saw Ogopogo, she would be terrified. I was fascinated. I wanted to see it, but we had no sightings.
Well, I think this is the thing with cryptid sightings in general. I've asked this question. I've been out on Loch Ness a couple of times when it started to get a bit dark. And by the way, it's very pristine there, so probably similar to Lake Okanagan. Once it's dark, it's just nothing but blackness. Mm-hmm. And I've been out on Lake Champlain as well after dark. And what starts to happen actually is that you realize that you're in a real situation, that if something that's 40 feet long should suddenly appear and take a dislike to you, you're very vulnerable. Yes. And I think that's what affects people when they actually see something unbelievable like that. They don't know what's going to happen next, and they think, well, this is a real situation. This is not like, it's only a tale to tell after the experience is finished and you've come home safely, right? While it's happening, it's a terrifying encounter. And I think that's the difference. But I would still like to see him. So let me give you the sighting. One of many. So on 27th of November 1975, two brothers, Charles and Donald Simpson, were driving towards Brack Arena around Lochmore on a bird-watching expedition. The Morar River, as it leaves the loch, flows over a narrow ridge of gravel so that for a short distance it's only a couple of feet deep. At 3 p.m., just as they were passing that spot, Charles, who was watching the road, had heard his brother, who was driving, suddenly gasp. What Donald had seen was a robust 20-foot-long animal which rose out of the river less than 40 feet from the car. It lurched across the gravel bar and sank into the deeper waters of the loch. He said it had smooth brown skin like a drum and commented particularly on the muscles in its powerful hindquarters, which were unmistakable as it hauled itself over the gravel bar. He saw no ears or eyes, but said there was what looked like a trunk trailing along the side of the body. And shortly afterwards, under his supervision, a neighbour did a small watercolour painting of what he'd seen, which you can find actually on Roland Watson's Loch Ness Mystery blog. He's got a great copy of that. And then there's another one, just very quickly, by a joiner from Edinburgh called Robert Duff. And he had what qualified as the clearest sighting of the animal on 8th of July 1969, fishing from a boat in Mobley Bay on the southern shore, where the water is no more than 16 feet deep and crystal clear. He spotted a monster lizard lying motionless on the loch's white leaf-strewn bottom, looking up at him. Estimated the creature was 20 feet long, with a snake-like earless head, slit eyes, and a wide mouth. His body was grey-brown with rough skin, and it had 4 limbs, with 3 toes visible on each front foot, plus a tail. He was so unnerved that he left the area immediately. Who can blame him? In a small rowing boat in 16 feet of water. There's a 20-foot lizard beneath you. You might leave the area. There's many more, but Morar to me is it's exciting because at least you can see, and in Loch Ness you can't see anything. The peat completely stains the water.
It's someplace I've always wanted to go to is Scotland, because I think I had mentioned to you before my grandfather was born in Oban, and I've always wanted to go there to see where my grandfather grew up as a young lad, and visit all these places, Loch Ness, and go all over the UK. But so far I have not had the pleasure of going, but it definitely is on the top of my bucket list.
I'm sure you will. I think you'll probably find a lot of the topography very similar on the smaller scale to Canada.
That's
to be
what I
honest
hear.
with you. Yeah, I would imagine that Scots would be very happy in Canada, well, Highlanders especially in Canada and vice versa.
Yeah.
Really, it's but yeah, that whole area open all around there. It's beautiful. And it really is very beautiful. I think that's right on the coast actually, Oban, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. From what I understand, it used to be a fishing community. I don't know if it still is now.
Yeah. I'm sure it's near Loch Linya, actually. I'll bring it up now. Yeah, it's not far from there. It's actually in the main. You've got the main sort of sea there, but it's definitely near Loch Linya. Anyway.
It's funny, for years my father and I were mispronouncing it because of the way it's spelt. We kept saying it was a Boyne, and finally I met someone from Scotland and they said, where? And I spelt it and they said, oh, no, that's Oban. I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. The Celtic, the Scottish Gaelic is very difficult. I mean, I grew up in Wales where they have Welsh, and that's very hard. Essentially, if you don't know the pronunciation of the alphabet, you're lost.
Yeah.
Definitely lost.
There's a few places like that in Canada as well.
I'm sure. Would those be named by local tribes, the places that are difficult to pronounce, or by different European settlers?
Yes. It's fascinating how, I was just telling this to my daughter the other day, how over in England and Scotland, there's so many different accents depending what part you're from. And it's such a small area compared to Canada, and so many different accents.
Well, they did a genetic test here very recently in the UK, where they were I don't know where they got the samples from, maybe from ancient burials and things like that. But they were able to test people in different regions and different areas of the UK. And what they saw was that genetically, the current homogenous population, anyway, of native Brits were almost exactly genetically the same as the people who inhabited that area 1,000 years ago. Really? And so most people had stayed within their region throughout the country, apart from big hub centers of big cities and things like that. Most people were the same in every area from 1,000 years ago. So people that lived up in Lancashire or Yorkshire or these different places were the same people who were there 1,000 years ago genetically. And of course, you've got not 4 races, but six races in the UK, actually. So with their own languages, you have the English, you have the Welsh, you have the Scottish, the Northern Irish, technically. Then you have the Manx and the Cornish. Also 2 Celtic peoples with their own language, although they're almost extinct, those languages now. They're still genetically different peoples. That's the genetic original makeup. And even that is vastly reduced from what it used to be. And if you look at the UK, it's the different accents especially, it's a testimony to invasion and tribalism.
Yep.
And all the different things that happened during those times, with the Vikings there, like in Yorkshire. Even York is a Viking word, I think. And parts of Scotland. And then further towards the west, it's very much more Celtic because those places were hard to get into. People are smaller, darker, for example. Interesting.
It's very interesting.
Mm.
Do you think where there's such a diverse ethnicity, I guess, for lack of a better term, perhaps there was a time where people brought their own myths and legends with them, and that's where some of the cryptids come from today?
I think definitely yes, and I think it's also probably responsible. If you look back into the different states in the US and which settlers originated there, settled there in large numbers, you'd find many of the European myths and legends were just transported with those peoples and kept alive in some respect. Things like Dogman, especially werewolves. That's just nothing but a werewolf. There's a chapter in the book, Beasts of Britain, called Dogman Rebranding the Werewolf. It's just a less embarrassing thing to say than werewolf. You say werewolf, you're a bit crazy. You say Dogman, it's like, well, what's that? It's kind of a creature, isn't it? But European folklore, which is essentially the backbone of white America anyway, and their myths and legends, is werewolf folklore. That's the whole background of it. So, has the resurgence of Dogman led to the resurgence of those types of things over here too, or is there some origination point in Europe for American interest in Bigfoot and Dogman? The Woodrows, the Green Man, the Wild Man. I don't really know. Either of these things are always with us everywhere, and in this interconnected world, we're just starting to be able to communicate, share those stories more openly, or the stories are influencing one another. Now, I will tell you one thing about the book, Beasts of North America. There's a chapter actually called Forever Finding Bigfoot, and it's just about where this resurgence came from in recent years, and how, in fact, you can base almost the entire cryptozoological conference community anyway, an online community, on the success of that show almost 10 years ago. That probably there would be nothing in existence right now. Most of these podcasts we wouldn't be doing.
Exactly.
Whatever the show was for its worth, it it normalized things, it expanded things at a time when people were still in chat rooms, right?
Yes.
So it's an interesting concept, and I would like to talk to Cliff and Bob about that at some point. Do you realize where we would be right now if this show that was a bit uncomfortable for you at points and pulled your morals to the edge now and again, you had to rein in, if the show hadn't taken off? where would everybody else be? And that's what I'm interested in cryptozoology. What is the origination point? When Lauren Coleman said in 2008 or 9, there may be an alligator, I think that's the day, I could be wrong, explosion in New York sewers of rogue alligators, and people would be in danger of getting attacked. I don't know exactly what he said, but there was a suggestion there could be a population explosion. If we'd all based future sightings on that, we should imagine that people are getting attacked in New York State or the city or whatever every single weekend, right, by alligators. But no, there's never been any reports since, right? Nothing. Who are the people in the background of this that we're basing cryptozoological law on? And is our lack of questioning them on what they've come up with leading to precepts that we base everything else on? And that was one of the main points with the trees, the stick structures. Some point somebody said something that was respected. We've all followed it. Who is it? And why do we think it's valid?
Good questions.
Rant. Rant. Sorry.
That's quite all right. I find with communication, you can find out so much so quickly now with communication this day and age, that I find more and more people who are having encounters with any kind of cryptid are coming forward more often now to say, hey, I'm not the only one who's encountered this, and it's nice to know. So in a way, technology can be good.
Yeah, definitely. I'm all turned around in technology. I used to be so against the whole thing and wouldn't even switch on the computer. And
really?
Sitting there with my book, and now I'm just like, well, actually, when we were all watching VHS, I wasn't complaining there was no Super 8, right?
Yeah.
And when we were watching DVDs, I was like, oh, but I want to really take ages to rewinding this thing and get the tape all spooled up and have to wind it back into the cassette. I was like, no, DVDs are great. When DVDs left, I was like, but I've got my collection still. Do I really want to stream? And now it remembers exactly where I was watching it every single time. And I don't have to load it up, and I hope it's not scratched. It is better, actually. But change takes time to get used to.
It sure does. Well, I know we only have a few minutes to go because you have to leave us. So I will be... Oh, that's quite all right. You're a busy guy today. But I will be adding links in the show notes when this gets released. But why don't you tell us where people can find you and find your books? Okay.
So best place to find the book, Amazon.com or Amazon. Wherever you are, if you're in a different country. I have made it as cheap as possible. So the Kindle and the paperback is at the cheapest possible price that they will let me set it. I just would like you to have it. You can also find me on Facebook.com/Beasts of. That's a good place to find me. I'm always there. Instagram, Twitter, the same. Tumblr. Generally, Facebook is good. You can message me. You can ask me questions. You can talk to me. I will talk back to you, perhaps a little too much at points. But I will answer you. Will I stop answering you is the issue. I will definitely speak to you. And then there's a website too, beastofbritain.com, but it's a little behind. It needs updating.
Perfect. I definitely want to check out that book. And folks, go to YouTube and check out Sticks and Stones UK Bigfoot. Highly recommend it. I hope you'll be doing more documentaries. We will. Later in the year, we will be doing a few other bits and pieces and just trying to get a few of the British things under wraps. Nice. And I'm looking forward to the North American book. Again, you'll have to let me know when it's released. Yes, I mean, July, hopefully by July. I've got 2 months of solid writing ahead of me. And if I get through it and it looks reasonable, I will publish it. Fingers crossed. Yes. Well, thank you so much, Andy. I really appreciated this. You can. Thank you very much. And you take care. You too. You too. Bye. Bye.
Well, we've made it to the end of another episode. Thanks so much for listening. Until next time, take care of each other. And if you'd like to be on the show or have questions and comments, just drop me an email, paranormalheart13@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you.
Paranormal Heart would like to extend a special thank you to PurplePlanet.com for supplying the music for the show. The views and opinions expressed on Paranormal Heart are those of the host and participants.